Theory in a nutshell. Intervals. Identifying simple intervals, major, minor, and perfect. An interval is the distance between any two notes. First of all, we need to find out the size of the interval, how big or small it is. The lowest note in an interval is counted as 1. The top note is the number of the interval. So a C to an E is 1, 2, 3. That's a third. C, D, E. Some people like to count on their fingers. Some people like to count on the staff. 1, 2, 3. Okay? Now, again, there's all sorts of different ones. On a simple interval, you're talking anywhere from a first, a 1, which is a unison really, to an octave, which would be an 8. Again, you would count them. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a fourth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Or you can go E, F, G, A, B, C, 6. And then here, the one right here that's written is a second, a 2. G, A, 1, 2. But again, it goes right from, the simple intervals go from a unison, which would be a 1, to an 8, an octave, G to G. There are two types of intervals. There are the perfect intervals, which are firsts, fourths, fifths, and eighths. And there are major minor intervals, 2, 3, 6, and 7ths. Now you just have to memorize this. And there is a way that some people find helpful. If you think about a major scale, C major, G, A, B, and C, from here to here, that's your octave. So here to here would be a 1, if a C to a C. C to the next C up is the octave. And the middle two notes of the scale, that's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's your fourth. There's your fifth. So it's kind of like the outside and the inside of a scale. Right? So then you've got the 1, 4, 5, 8 are your perfect intervals. 2, 3, 6, 7 are your major minor intervals. Perfect intervals can never be major or minor in quality. And major minor intervals can never be perfect in quality. You cannot have a perfect third. You cannot have a major fifth. Okay? Perfects are always perfects, and major minors are always major minors. Now the next part you have to know is how to figure out the quality of an interval. So you think in the key of the bottom note of whatever interval you're looking at. This bottom note is C, so you're thinking in C major. C major is right here for you. If that top note of the interval is in the scale of the bottom note, then that interval is a major or a perfect, depending on how big it is. So we've got a 3 here. So we're looking at a major minor, right? So here's C, we're thinking in C major, there's an E. In C, C, D, E, it has an E natural. So this is a major third. It's important to remember, again, if you're dealing with a perfect interval, 1, 4, 5, or 8, or a major minor interval, 2, 3, 6, and 7. So again, the steps to identify the quality of an interval is first to determine its size. Okay? So we're going to do the first one here. It's 3. 1, 2, 3. G, A, B. Use your fingers or count up. And we're going to do 2 here, side by side. And G to D, G, A, B, C, D, that's a 5. Or you can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have a third and a fifth. And I picked these because this is a major minor type. This is a perfect type. Okay, these are both in G major. Here's your G major scale down here. G to G with an F sharp in it. So we asked ourselves whether it was a perfect interval or major minor. We answered that a second ago. And we're going to take one at a time. So we know this is a major minor interval. We think in the key of the bottom note, G major. Is the top note in there? G, A, B. It's a B natural. Yes, it is. So that makes it a major third. Here's your fifth, G to a D. G, A, B, C, D. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's just a D major. That's a D major. That's your perfect fifth. So we have a major third here and a perfect fifth because the top notes are found naturally occurring in the scale of the bottom note. So in these two intervals, we're thinking in G major. Now, if the top note is not in the scale of the bottom note in a major or minor interval, and is 1/2 step closer to the bottom note than the scale note would be, it's called a minor interval. That's a lot of information right there. Okay, you can have perfect intervals that are smaller, but we're not talking about this at this level. At this level, perfects are staying perfect, and only our majors can become 1/2 step closer. So what do I mean about that? Let's look at this. Determine the size. 1, 2, 3. G, G, A, B. 1, 2, 3. So it's a third. Well, you're going to ask yourself, is it a perfect interval or a major minor interval? It's the major minor interval, right? Perfects are 1, 4, 5, 8. This is a third. Thinking the key of the bottom note, G. Here's your G major scale. You don't have to write it out, but you should know it. And you can see how important it is to know your scales when doing intervals, or all your key signatures. Now, is the top note in the scale of the bottom key? No. It's a half step closer. So this is G to a B. This is a B flat. It's closer to the bottom note. It's 1/2 step closer to the bottom note. It's making it smaller, smaller than a major, so it is a minor third. This is a minor third. Using a minus sign for minor, I'm using a plus sign for major. Okay, so it's not in the scale. The scale has a B natural. This is a B flat. Let's try another one. Now here, these are both sevenths. I use the same notes. G to an F. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or you can use your fingers. Each of these are a 7. So now I know it's one of our major minors. Here it is. I asked myself, is it perfect or major minor? I end up with major minor. Key of the bottom, again, we're sticking with G major because that's what we're going to, it's just easier if we're doing the same thing all the time. Now, is the top note in the scale of the bottom key? Well, this one, that's an F natural, but when we look at G major, that should be an F sharp, so no. For this one, the top note is not in the scale. In this one, yep, there's your F sharp. So we know that this is the major. This being 1/2 step lower, 1/2 step closer to the bottom note, this is your minor. Okay, so that F sharp is found in the key of G major, that makes it major. This is an F natural over here, there's no sharp. It's an F natural, that makes it minor. It's 1/2 step closer to the bottom note. Here we go, a couple more. Now, let's look at these. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's some type of fourth. Now, I already said that all the fourths right now will be perfect. Kind of gave that away. But we can take a look at that. A flat major. I didn't write out the scale this time, but does it have a D flat? Yes, it does, because A flat major has 4 flats. Battle ends and down. Fourth flat is D. So A flat major does have a D flat. So this is your perfect, P for perfect, fourth. Now here's an A flat to an A flat. Well, this is interesting. It's the same note. It's an octave apart. That's a perfect octave. I suppose I should put the 8 first, but here we go. Perfect octave. 8 for octave. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But you should be able to identify an octave, A flat to an A flat. That's a perfect octave. Okay? Now here are the same intervals down here, but with a key signature. Sometimes you're asked in the question, one with a key signature. So it doesn't look like there's an A flat there. We have to remember, sometimes you've got 4 or 5 different ones along a line. You've got to remember the flats or the sharps that are in the key signature. So what I suggest is you go around and write those flats in your work or in your exam or whatever you're doing, so you don't forget that they're flats, because after you've done a couple of them, you get further away along the line from the key signature, you might forget about them. So these are actually the same as those, a perfect fourth and a perfect eighth, but without those flats written in. If we don't put those in, they don't look it, do they? And it's different because it's got a key signature. That only in looks, not in actual type of interval they are. This is still your perfect fourth, your perfect octave, perfect eighth, because that's an A flat, A flat, A flat, D flat, same as up there. Now, one thing I suggest to people if they really have trouble with this, because some people in the beginning have real trouble really understanding intervals. So I started to write down some of the keys here. I went C major, G, D, A. And if you're looking at, let's say, let's just do one here, 3, 4, 5, not very straight, but that'll live. You can live with that. Let's do something in G major, but we'll actually do it in G major. Okay, so we'll do a G to an E. Okay, so you might be like, what? I can't think. First of all, you can always count it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's a sixth. And then if you've written out all your scales, and I wouldn't suggest using this later on, but when you're first learning this, if you're really struggling, I would suggest this. Because you really need to know your key signatures. It'll help you learn your key signatures. They go together, right? Key signatures, intervals, you need to know them. So I know I'm starting on a G, then I would count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I see it's E natural. I see that's an E natural, so I know it's a major sixth. right? So one way to help yourself, have a little cheat sheet of all your scales. Don't rely on that forever, but to really understand the concepts of the intervals and how the minor ones are half a step closer and they're not in here. For example, if this were an E flat, all of a sudden you would look up here and you'd say, well, that should be an E natural, that's an E flat, so therefore it's a minor 6. That doesn't look like a minor there, but that's what I'm trying to go for there, a minor 6. So it can be helpful to write out the scales in the beginning. I hope this helped.